Have you ever wondered why life often places challenges in your path, or why you face trials at the hands of those who underestimate or oppose you? Perhaps you felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of injustice, or the pain of being dismissed. If this resonates with you, stay with me. Today, we're exploring a profound message of resilience, faith, and divine justice that will encourage your heart and transform your perspective. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss these powerful messages. When life wounds us, it's easy to let bitterness take root, to nurse thoughts of revenge, or to dwell on the unfairness of it all. Yet, such reactions threaten to corrupt our very essence. As C.S. Lewis wisely observed, to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. This truth challenges us to rise above our pain, not by ignoring it, but by entrusting it to God. Resentment, when allowed to linger, transforms into a poison that erodes our peace and joy. The Bible offers us clear guidance on this matter. Proverbs 24 verse 29 warns us, "Do not say, 'I'll do to them as they have done to me. I'll pay them back for what they did.' Instead, we are called to place these grievances in the hands of God, trusting that His justice is perfect and will prevail in due time. This act of surrender is not a sign of weakness, but a profound strength. It frees us from the burden of vengeance and allows us to focus on the path of righteousness. Consider the story of Daniel, a man who faced life-threatening opposition simply because of his unwavering faith. Envy and deceit led to his being thrown into the lions' den, a seemingly hopeless situation. Yet Daniel placed his trust entirely in God, proclaiming with confidence, "My God sent His angel, and He shut the mouths of the lions." The outcome was miraculous. Daniel emerged unscathed, while his accusers met their due justice. This narrative reveals a divine principle that remains true today. No one who opposes God's chosen escapes His perfect justice. Similarly, the life of Joseph offers another powerful example of faith triumphing over adversity. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned, Joseph could have succumbed to despair. Instead, he remained faithful, trusting that God had a purpose even in his suffering. When he finally rose to a position of power in Egypt, he forgave his brothers, declaring, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Both Daniel and Joseph endured great hardship, yet they emerged victorious because they chose to trust in God's sovereignty. Their stories remind us that God's justice is inevitable and His timing is perfect. As you reflect on these lessons, ask yourself, are you willing to release your grievances into God's hands? Are you ready to trust Him to fight your battles and bring justice His time? If so, embrace this truth. God is already at work on your behalf. Though circumstances may appear stagnant or even unfavorable, the pieces are moving in the spiritual realm. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. Take a moment to declare with faith, "A period of justice and reward begins today in my life." Believe it, and trust that the God who vindicated Daniel and Joseph will do the same for you. Life often feels unfair. Those who oppose you seem to prosper, while your efforts may go unnoticed or unappreciated. But here's the truth. God sees everything. Not a single act of betrayal, injustice, or mockery escapes His notice. In the spiritual realm, every wrong is accounted for and God's justice will prevail. This is not just wishful thinking, it is a divine promise. Think about Joseph's journey again. Sold by his own brothers, betrayed by those closest to him. Joseph's life appeared to spiral, into misfortune. Yet, even in the depths of his despair, God's hand was at work. In the prison, Joseph's faithfulness led to divine favor. His ability to interpret dreams brought him before Pharaoh, and in one miraculous moment, Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister. What does this teach us? That even in our darkest moments, God is working. He is setting the stage for a comeback so extraordinary that it will leave everyone around you in awe. The very situations meant to destroy you will become the stepping stones to your destiny. As C.S. Lewis insightfully said, hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. God's justice is not limited to your personal vindication. It is part of his greater plan for your life. Joseph understood this when he forgave his brothers. His response wasn't just an act of personal virtue, it was a recognition of God's sovereignty. You intended to harm me, he told them, but God intended it for good. This same truth applies to you. Whatever harm others have caused, God can use it for your good. He can transform every tear, every setback, every humiliation into a story of redemption. But here's the key: you must choose forgiveness. By forgiving, you are not excusing their actions or denying your pain. You are freeing yourself from the chains of bitterness and allowing God to take over. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or condoning what was done to you. It means trusting God's justice over your own. Proverbs 20 verse 22 reminds us, do not say, I'll pay you back for this wrong. Wait for the Lord, and he will avenge you. This waiting is not passive, it's an active choice to focus on what pleases God while leaving vengeance in his hands. Let's pause for a moment and reflect. Are you holding on to bitterness or a desire for revenge? If so, I encourage you to release it to God. Say this with me. Lord, I entrust my pain and my enemies to you. I trust in your justice, and I release this burden to you. As you make this declaration, something shifts, chains break, and your heart is free to receive the peace that only God can give. This act of surrender allows you to focus on the future. God has prepared for you, a future filled with hope, victory, and restoration. Remember, the battle is not yours. It belongs to God. Whatever you're facing, know that he has not forgotten you. He sees the injustice, hears your cries, and is already working behind the scenes. Though it may seem like nothing is happening, trust that God's timing is perfect. Life's trials often feel overwhelming, leaving us questioning why we must endure them. But every trial carries a divine purpose, even if it isn't immediately clear. Think about Daniel, standing in the lion's den. From a human perspective, it was a hopeless situation. Yet, Daniel trusted in God's power, declaring with unwavering faith that God would send his angel to shut the lions' mouths, and God did. What can we learn from this? That God's power knows no limits. He is not bound by earthly circumstances or the plans of those who seek to harm you. What seems like the end is often a setup for a divine miracle. Daniel's deliverance was not just for his benefit, it became a testimony that glorified God and transformed the hearts of those who witnessed it. The same is true for you. Whatever challenge you're facing, remember this. God is writing a story with your life, and every chapter serves a purpose. The pain you feel now may be preparing you for a greater blessing than you can imagine. As C.S. Lewis said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Joseph's life is another testament to this truth. Sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused and forgotten in prison, Joseph could have given up. Yet he held on to his faith, believing that God was in control. And when the time was right, God lifted him to a position of power that not only saved Egypt, but also redeemed his family. Joseph's rise to greatness wasn't just about personal success, it was about fulfilling God's greater purpose. When he finally faced his brothers, he had every reason to seek revenge, but instead he chose forgiveness. "Do not be afraid," he told them. "Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." This profound understanding of God's sovereignty is a lesson for all of us. No matter how unjust or painful your circumstances may seem, God can and will use them for good, but He asks for your trust. He invites you to release your plans, your fears, and your frustrations into His hands. It's not always easy to trust when you're in the middle of the storm, but consider this: just as the pieces of a puzzle only make sense when viewed as a whole, the pieces of your life's challenges will come together to reveal a beautiful picture of God's purpose. Take heart in this promise. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Romans 8 verse 28. This verse doesn't mean life will be free from struggles, but it assures us that every struggle has a redemptive purpose. As you reflect on these truths, ask yourself, are you willing to trust God's timing, even when it feels like nothing is happening? Are you ready to believe that your trials are not the end, but the beginning of something extraordinary? Declare this with me. Lord, I trust you to take my trials and turn them into triumphs. I believe you are working all things for my good. Let this declaration fill your heart with hope and expectancy. When you face trials, it's easy to feel as though the world has moved on without you, leaving you behind. But let me assure you, nothing could be further from the truth. God's timing is perfect, and His plans are far greater than anything you could imagine. What may seem like a delay is actually divine preparation. Think about Joseph. While he was in prison, forgotten by those he helped, it would have been easy for him to feel abandoned. Yet, what Joseph didn't know was that God was orchestrating events that would lead to his rise to power. In a single moment, Joseph went from prisoner to ruler, entrusted with the resources to save an entire nation during a famine. This reminds us of an important truth. God's blessings often come suddenly, when we least expect them, but they are always right on time. Isaiah 60 verse 22 declares, "When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen." If you feel like you're stuck or falling behind, remember this promise. God is never late. God's justice also works in extraordinary ways. When He acts, it's not just to restore what was lost, but to bless you abundantly beyond measure. The story of Job is a perfect example. Job lost everything: his family, his wealth, and his health. Yet he remained faithful, refusing to curse God even in his darkest hour. In the end, God restored Job's fortunes, giving him twice as much as he had before. What does this mean for you? It means that your current struggles are not the final word. God sees the injustices, the betrayals, and the pain you've endured, and He promises to act. Not only will He restore what was taken from you, but He will also bless you in ways you never thought possible. This is not just about material blessings, it's about a deeper transformation. When God moves in your life, He heals your heart, renews your spirit, and strengthens your faith. The challenges you face become testimonies of His goodness, and the blessings you receive become tools for His glory. As C.S. Lewis said, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." This truth invites us to focus not on our losses, but on the future God is preparing for us. It's a future filled with hope, purpose, and joy. Now, let's talk about God's justice. While it may seem that those who hurt or belittled you are thriving, remember that no one escapes divine justice. The Bible assures us in Deuteronomy 32, verse 35, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay." This doesn't mean we should wish harm on anyone. Instead, we can find peace in knowing that God's justice is perfect and that He will handle every situation in His way and time. Your job is not to seek revenge, but to trust God's process. Release your pain and allow Him to fight your battles. As you do, you'll find that His justice often includes surprising acts of restoration and redemption. He can use the very people who oppose you to bless you, just as He did with Joseph's brothers when they came to Egypt for help. Take a moment to declare this truth. Lord, I trust You to restore what I've lost and to bless me according to Your perfect will. I release the desire for revenge and place my life in Your hands. As we conclude, I want to remind you of one profound truth. God's plans for you are good, and they are far greater than what you've lost or endured. You may have faced rejection, humiliation, or loss, but none of it was in vain. In fact, every trial has prepared you for a season of double honor, a time when God's blessings will overflow in your life. In the Bible, Isaiah 61 verse 7 declares, "Instead of your shame you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace you will rejoice in your inheritance." This promise is for you. It speaks of restoration, of God lifting you out of the ashes of defeat and placing you in a position of victory. When Joseph was reunited with his brothers, he could have chosen to remind them of their betrayal, to dwell on the years of pain he had endured. But instead, Joseph extended forgiveness, showing that his heart was aligned with God's purpose. His decision not only restored his family, but also solidified his role in God's divine plan. What does this mean for you? It means that forgiveness is the key to stepping into your double portion. By letting go of bitterness and embracing God's justice, you open the door to blessings and opportunities you never imagined. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it transforms it, allowing God to turn your pain into power and your scars into strength. But stepping into your season of honor also requires action. It's not enough to wait passively for blessings to arrive. God calls us to prepare our hearts, to align ourselves with His will, and to walk forward in faith. Think of the Israelites as they prepared to enter the promised land. They had to take steps of obedience, trust God's timing, and follow His guidance. The same is true for you. If you've been waiting for a breakthrough, now is the time to act. Start by declaring God's promises over your life. Speak words of faith, even if your circumstances haven't changed yet. Say this with me. A period of justice and reward begins today in my life. I believe that God is restoring what I've lost and blessing me with a double portion. As you declare this truth, let it transform your mindset. Begin to see yourself as God sees you, not as a victim of your circumstances, but as a victor through Christ. The weight of past disappointments will begin to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and expectancy. And don't be surprised when opportunities start to arise. God's favor often manifests through divine connections, open doors, and moments of grace that seem almost too good to be true. These are not coincidences. They are part of God's plan to reward your faithfulness and bring glory to His name. In this new season, stay humble and grateful. Remember that the blessings you receive are not just for you, but for others as well. God blesses us so that we can be a blessing. Share your testimony, encourage those around you, and use your gifts to make a difference. As we close, I want to leave you with these words from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, no matter what you face, God is with you. His promises are unshakable, and His justice is sure. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this message has spoken to your heart, take a moment to like this video, share it with 3 people who need encouragement, and comment below with the phrase, "A period of justice and reward begins today in my life." Let's declare it together in faith. Remember, you are not alone. You are chosen, loved, and destined for victory. Subscribe to this channel for more inspiring messages, and may God bless you abundantly as you step into your season of double honor. Amen.